The reality is that everyone has an opinion about Jesus. Everyone has a bit. Now, you might not have thought about what your opinion about Jesus is. You might not have given that much thought or much reflection, but everybody has an opinion about Jesus and what Jesus is all about. Your friends have an opinion about Jesus and what he's all about. Your professor has an opinion about Jesus. Your coworkers have an opinion. Media has an opinion. Politicians have an opinion. Both sides claim he's on their side. Atheists have an opinion about Jesus. Celebrities have an opinion about Jesus. Your parents, your kids. And here's my point. Everyone has an opinion about Jesus and what he's all about. And my point is that there is a lot of noise out there. There's a whole lot of noise out there about Jesus. And there's a lot of voices who would be more than willing to share their opinions, for good or bad, about who Jesus is and what Jesus is all about. And the core burden behind this series is that we oftentimes, so often, we here right now, we make up our own minds about who Jesus is based on the opinions and actions of others. In other words, we never really go to the source. We never really go to Jesus and just let Jesus speak for himself. We form our own ideas about who Jesus is based on the opinions of others, never going to Jesus and just hearing from him in his own words about who he is, who he claimed to be, and what he came to do. And the reality, and listen, man, this is what gets me, man. The reality is that some of you are here today and you are stuck. You are stuck now with an opinion of Jesus that is not rooted in anything remotely close to resembling who Jesus actually claimed to be. And so for these coming weeks, we're just gonna let Jesus speak for himself. We're gonna go straight to Jesus, not your professor, not your parents, not those people who claim to be Christians but hurt you all those years ago. We're gonna explore who Jesus is and who he claimed to be in his own words. And you might, and I said this last week, you might be surprised with what you find. Last week, we actually discovered that at one point, Jesus came out. See, Jesus would oftentimes do this. Jesus would say, okay, you want me to tell you who I am? I'll tell you who I am. And then he would make these statements, and he would use images and word pictures that were very common in the world, of the first century world, still very common in our world today. And so last week, we looked at this idea that Jesus said at one point. He says, I'm the bread of life. That's what he said. You want to know who I am? I'm the bread of life. I'm telling you, man, last week was a carb lover's dream here at church. And I learned a lot about you as a church last week, man. Some of you take your gluten serious. That makes me so happy, by the way. In fact, here was the best part of my week. I'll show you a picture of the best part of my week. This was the highlight of my week right here. Because I walked into my office on Tuesday, and that was delivered, fresh baked. Thank you, Ellie Zemer. That was made, by the way, she wrote me a note. She said, this was made with flour directly imported from Mount Joy, Pennsylvania. So, that's a joke. If you were here last week, you understand that. Anyways, that was awesome. And actually, after seeing that response last week, I was real tempted this week to just make something up. Like Jesus said, I am the smoked brisket of life, just to see what shows up this week. Unfortunately, he never said that. But he did make another claim about himself that I want us to look at today. A claim that I believe it has the potential to set some of you free today. Some of you are going to experience a new kind of freedom today because of this claim that Jesus made. Because Jesus is going to point out a longing in this statement we're going to see. He's going to point out a longing that every single one of us have that he alone can fulfill if we'll let him. This is the claim he made. This is Jesus in his own words right here. I am the vine. I am the vine. Now listen, don't be sending me a bunch of vines this week. I don't need a greenhouse in my office this week, all right? But let me ask you something. Have you ever experienced a season of life that you just felt like you were going through the motions? You know what I mean? Like life is happening. It's not like life has stopped. It's not like life has paused or anything. Life's happening. You're getting up every day, but everything has just lost a little color. You're doing your work, you're going to school, you're shuttling the kids around, and you don't know how it happened, you don't know when it happened, but somewhere along the way, you just don't really feel connected anymore to any greater sense of purpose for your life. You don't really feel like you're thriving anymore. And we don't, all the times, we don't oftentimes know how to describe that season of life or what that feels like, but we oftentimes use words like this. I don't know, I feel dry. I feel empty. You ever heard someone say something like that? Like, I feel empty, I feel stagnant, I feel like I'm not growing. And it's in those seasons that it feels like our relationships aren't going anywhere. We keep repeating the same old patterns, don't we? We just keep ending up at the same old place again and again and again. It feels like our work might not be going anywhere. And see, the question is this: when we are in those seasons where it just feels stagnant, it feels like we're not growing, it feels like we're not moving towards purpose in any way, that's credible in our life. The question to me that's so interesting is, why do those seasons create such angst in us? In other words, what is it in us that just refuses to settle for being stagnant and stuck? Why is that not acceptable to us? And even if you're here today and you're not sure where you land on the whole Jesus stuff, you're back at church for the first time in a long time, or maybe the first time ever, and you're exploring what it might mean to follow Jesus, but haven't made up your mind yet. This is true for you. This is true for everybody, in other words. This is not a faith thing, a religious thing, a Jesus thing. This is a thing for every person who's ever taken a breath. Something in us does not want to settle. And see, this longing that we have to live a life that's growing, that's moving somewhere, that's becoming something. This is exactly what Jesus is speaking into when he makes this statement about who he is and what he wants to do in our lives when he says, I am the vine. See, he originally made this statement to some of his closest followers on the night before his execution on the cross. And I can imagine that in that moment, the anxiety was thick in the air. And Jesus looks at his followers and he knows that within the next 24 hours, their worlds are going to be absolutely rocked by what they're going to experience. And he wants to remind them of what's most true. And it's into that moment that he says these words. This is in John chapter 15. He says, yes, I am the vine. There it is, right? There's our statement. I am the vine. And you are the branches. You who? My followers. Those who remain in me, and I in them, will produce much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. You know what I love about this? Man, I love this statement so much. And you know what I love about it? See, in this moment right here, this small little statement right here, Jesus is not only revealing a glimpse of who he is and what he came to do, Jesus is articulating a vision for your life. He's giving you a vision for your life. His heart and his desire and his intention for you is that you live a life that is fruitful. In other words, that's growing. A life that produces good things. It's not stagnant, not dry, not empty. In fact, he actually qualifies it. Did you catch that? He says that he doesn't want you just to bear fruit. He wants you to live a life that produces what? Much fruit. Just fruit falling all over the place as you walk around. Jesus saying, in other words, here's what I want you to hear. Jesus saying, you want to know why? Do you want to know why there is something in you that just is not satisfied with just waking up and getting through life? Something inside of you longs for more than just existing. Something inside of you longs to have meaning and purpose. He says, I'll tell you why. It's because you have been created by God. You have been created by God to bear fruit, to grow, in other words, into more and more of who he designed you to be. In fact, the very first followers of Jesus, they reflected on this reality. They reflected on these words. And one of the leaders in the early church, his name was Paul, and he articulated what Jesus wants to grow in our lives. Because some of you might be sitting there going, well, what does that fruit look like? What does that mean? What kind of fruit am I supposed to bear in my life? And this is what it says in Galatians. It says the Holy Spirit produces this kind of fruit. He's like, all right, you want to know what he wants to bear in your life, what he wants to bring about in your life? Love, joy, patience, peace, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Man, I like that list. I certainly don't experience that all the time, but man, I want more of that. I want more of that. And I just want you to hear, this is the life you were made for. This is the life you were made for. You were created for that. You were created, listen, you were not created to live in despair. And some of you are in a dark place today, and I just want you to know you were not created to live in despair. You were actually made for joy. You were not created to live filled with anxiety. You were created to experience peace. You were made for kindness. You were created for patience. You were made for love. This is who he wants to grow us into. And God desires our homes to be marked with that kind of fruit, our marriages to be marked by that kind of fruit, our work life to be marked with that kind of fruit, our relationships to be marked with that kind of fruit. And Jesus is saying, I can do that in you. I can produce that in you if you stay connected to me. In fact, he actually pushes it way further. You remember what he said at the end of that passage we just looked at? Look what he said. He says, for apart from me, you can do nothing. And see, this is the part real quick where some of you read that little statement right there and you check out. Now, you don't want to admit it, you don't want to say it, but you got an objection and you already raised it. You're like, I don't know about that, Jesus. Apart from you, you can do nothing. Apart from me, I've done a lot of things, Jesus. A lot of things without you. I got dressed this morning without you. By the way, some of y'all did nice on that. Good job. You look good. Others of you, we're going to pray. Some of you are like, I built the business without you. Did that. I got into the school without you, Jesus. I landed the job without you. In other words, I've been real successful. I've got a good life. I've got everything I set out to get. But see, listen, that's not what Jesus is saying. He's not saying that you can do no activity apart from him. You can do lots of activities apart from him. He's talking about bearing fruit. In other words, when he says, apart from me, you can do nothing, when he uses the word nothing, nothing is not talking about quantity. You can do a lot of things. It's talking about quality of life. And see, come on, man, you know this. Some of you know this. Some of you, if you were to tell your story to the people around you, this is the story you would tell. That we can do a lot of things in life, but at the end of the day, come to realize that they were not of ultimate importance. A lot of activity. We can be real successful in everything we touch, and yet our relationships crumble because love wasn't growing. But we were successful. We can hit all the goals we have for our life, and at the end of the day, pushed away our kids because patience wasn't growing. We can have plenty of activity, but what Jesus is after is helping us bear fruit. And the invitation that Jesus is making is not just to pull up your bootstraps and just try harder. That's not what he's saying here. He's not asking us to just become better people. Jesus is saying that the invitation I'm making to you is to get so close to me, so intimate, that you allow my presence and you allow my relationship with you to be the life source of everything for you. Like you are a branch attached to the vine. He says, if you do that, you'll bear fruit. Now listen, I would imagine that when those first followers heard him say this, they're thinking at that moment maybe like, I'm in. I like that. Give me the fruit. I like the fruit. I like some grapes. Want some of it. More love, more joy, more peace. Yep, sign me up. And maybe Jesus senses, I don't know, but maybe Jesus senses that they might not be understanding the fullness of this image of him being divine and us bearing fruit, which might be why Jesus goes a step further as he describes just how committed he is to growing us into people who bear fruit with our lives, because Jesus qualifies what that's going to mean if we want a life that bears fruit. This is what he said. He goes on, he says, I'm the true grapevine, and my Father is the gardener. And listen to this. He cuts off every branch that does not produce fruit, and he prunes the branches that do bear fruit so they will produce even more fruit. And this might be the point, by the way, where someone raises their hand and says, hold up, time out. I liked all that talk about fruit. Love the grape talk. Not so sure I'm liking this talk about cutting off things and pruning. Not following you on that one, Jesus. What about the fruit, not the prune? Actually, a few days ago, it was real fun. I spent some time at a boutique winery to prepare for this weekend. And I tell you that because I just want you to know the level of sacrifice I'm willing to make for you in order to bring my best. Anyways, I spent some time with Zach at Walt's Vineyards, and man, it was a great great afternoon. He gave me a crash course in vineyards and all that goes into producing this incredible fruit, which then they make into this incredible wine. And I got a picture. This was actually, we were over by some Merlot grapes, and Zach's telling me all about kind of how the process works. And Zach showed me a ton of things, but it was right here at this moment, talking about these Merlot grapes here, that Zach said something in passing that I just stopped and was like, time out, hold up. I need to write this down, what you just said. He told me that they've been in the business for decades now. They've been in it for years and years, and that they have seen a pattern, the same pattern time and time and time and time and time again in the vineyard. And it's this. This is what he said. The best fruit is always produced in the years that we have the worst weather. It's the most stressful seasons that create the most mature fruit. And he went on to say that the years that the conditions were perfect, you know what I mean? Like the years like the rain was perfect, the soil conditions were perfect, the weather was great. He said the vines grew really nice, but not the fruit. The plant looked healthy, in other words, but the fruit wasn't good. In other words, you could do everything to try to create the perfect conditions. You know what I mean? You could get the soil perfect. You could put them in greenhouses so that you can perfectly control the temps and the water and the weather, and the vines will naturally choose the easiest path, the path that requires the least amount of energy in the plant. It will grow great leaves, great vines, but little fruit. And here's why. See, as long as the grapevine doesn't think, as long as the branches don't think that its survival is at risk, it won't produce fruit because there's nothing at stake. So next time you eat a grape, remember that grape is in your hand because some branch thought it was going to die. And if you eat that and go, you're sick. Well, let's talk about this for a second. See, some of us have tried to orchestrate our entire lives like a greenhouse, controlling all the elements so that there's never any adversity in our life. How do we do that? We never get too close to people because then they can't hurt us. We never take risk because then we can't fail. We build our wealth not so that we can live generously and resource the work of God in this world, but we build our wealth to insulate us from all problems. And listen, guys, you can go through life that way, and the vine looks great. Oh, the leaves are full. The fruit? No. Fruit's developed under stress. And some of us are in seasons today, right now, that the conditions of our life are not what we would choose. It's stormy weather. The soil is dry and rocky. You're facing a sickness. You're facing a breakup. It's a struggle that you can't seem to get past. It's a kid who's gone off the rails. It's parents who are splitting up. And what Jesus is trying to burn into your heart, if that's you today, what Jesus is trying to burn into your heart today is that what looks like a season of drought, what looks like a season of struggle, what looks like a season where the weather is not cooperating, what looks like chaos in your life, God is at work right now. And he is pruning, and he is cutting away, and he is tending, and he has not left you behind. And for some of you, you need to hear that today. He has not left you behind, but he is working in you as you open yourself up more to his working, and he will produce fruit in you. He is so committed to us bearing fruit. Listen, he's so committed to us bearing fruit in our life, so committed us to becoming who we were created to be, that he will prune at times. That he will cut out the things that are not healthy in our lives. And some of you are like, well, I don't want to be pruned. It hurts. And you're right, it does. Pruning doesn't feel good. In fact, there's nothing more painful to the branch than pruning. But listen, there's nothing more irresponsible for the gardener than to ignore it. Because he wants to grow something in you. He will. And he can see what you don't. Sometimes we want the fruit, we just don't want the gardener. We don't want the pruning, but that's how we get it. And I just want to stress this because some of you are here. Guys, I know this. Some of you are here and you have quiet quit on God. No one else around you knows it. You're still going through the motions. You've just kind of quiet quit on it. There's really no relationship. There's no intimacy. You're not doing anything anymore. And the reason why, for some of you, you quiet quit on God a long time ago is because someone made a promise for God that God never made. Someone said that if you just follow Jesus, it's going to all work out exactly like you want it to. If you just pray harder, that's what you need to do. You just need to, do more work for Jesus. You just need to read the Bible more. And you did all that. But the sickness didn't go away. You did all that, and they still ended up leaving you. You did all that, and you still lost them. And you've held God responsible for a promise he never made. What Jesus actually said in his own words is that there will be seasons of stress and pruning and cutting away. And if you will trust the gardener's heart for you, if you won't walk away from those moments, from that process, he says, I can grow something in you that couldn't come about any other way. And I just want you to know right now, I want you to know this, wherever you are surrounded right now. You might not know it, but you are surrounded right now by people who have stories of seasons of drought and rough weather. And if you were to hear their stories, you would hear about loss. You would hear about stress and adversity. You would hear about sickness and pain. And if you heard some of their stories, you would sit back and you would think, man, I don't know how you did it. And I don't know how I would manage. If that happened to me, I don't know how I could ever get through that. I don't know what I would do in that moment. And yet here they are, having gone through it, and their faith is stronger, not weaker. Their joy is more evident, not less. And they're at peace, even knowing all that they went through. And if you were to talk to them, you would discover that all the fruit that has been produced in their lives, the love and patience and kindness, the self-control they exhibit, that fruit was not produced in them in spite of the pruning seasons. It wasn't in spite of the bad weather they faced. It was because of it. It was because of it. And do you know what they would tell you? They would tell you that the secret to bearing fruit, even when the conditions are working against you, is found in a small 6-letter word that Jesus used again and again and again in this passage. It's what Jesus said next that is the key to a life that thrives and bears fruit no matter what season you find yourself in. See if you can pick it up. Remain. I'll help you. Remain in me, and I'll remain in you. For a branch can't produce fruit if it's severed from the vine, and you can't be fruitful unless you, what? Remain in me. You know, it can take a vine up to 5 years before it's bearing mature fruit. Year after year after year, looking on the outside like nothing's happening. But what's happening on the inside is preparing it for the fruit it will bear later. See, fruit is created on the other side of stress. We just talked about that. But it's also created over time. And Jesus is saying, I've got fruit I want to produce in you. I'm doing a good work even when it feels painful. Don't give up on this. Stay with me. It might take time. Stay with me. Remain in me. Stay close to me. Don't walk away. Don't walk away. So how do we do that? How do we remain? How do we stay close? I want to get super practical for a second. I'm going to get real practical for a second, really simple. Because the question is, how do we stay close? How do we remain even no matter what season we find ourselves in? It just starts, let me just tell you real quick, it starts by setting aside time in our lives to show up, to hear from Jesus, to talk to him, to actually take in. Last week we talked about the idea of consuming Jesus, to take in his words, his promises, to saturate our lives with it, to stay connected to the vine. We attach ourselves to him by knowing what he says in his own words and letting the promises of his words saturate our thinking and our hearts. But in order to do that, we've got to prioritize to show up and hear from him, to go to the word of God. This is why we talk all the time here about making time to open up the Bible and hear from God. We talk about that all the time here. because we want to be attached to the vine, to stay close. But I also know, I know this from my own life. I'm assuming it's true for you. I know how hard that can be from a time standpoint to prioritize, because I know what most of our lives look like from a schedule. Think about it this way. I got a timeline here. We've got our week has 168 hours in it. All our weeks, 168 hours. We all share that in common. And here's how the majority of our weeks breaks down. This is true for us right here. The first is this: about a third of our life is spent sleeping. Third of our life spent sleeping. Enneagram 9s, a little bit more. Anyways, third of our life spent sleeping. Then you got about a third of your life that's spent for work and for school. So that's kind of happening, right? And that's a good thing. This leaves us with about 56 hours, all the remaining time there, with discretionary time. Now, anybody on social media? Liars, you're all on social media. Why are you not raising your hand? All right, you're all on social media. Everybody's on social media. Listen to this. The average person, you know how long they spend on social media a week? Some of you are like 2 hours, an hour. Yeah, right. No. You think so, 17 hours a week. That's the average time. So let's just put that in there. And I know right now you're thinking, not me. Just don't go to your history. Don't go look then if you don't want to know. I'm telling you, it's probably higher than you think. All right? Which means, by the way, now that we're down to 39 hours left. And we know what fills those remaining 39 hours. That fills the remaining 39 hours. We got to pay bills. We got to do groceries. We got to watch the Eagles win. We've got to watch the Cowboys lose. That is a 3.5 hours well worth it. Anyways, we got date nights. We got to read the book. We got to call the mom. We got to do all that stuff, right? And maybe, see, here's what happens. At least for me, maybe, at the end of all that, if I have the time, if I've got the margin, maybe God gets that. Maybe read a verse on a magnet on the fridge. That counts, right? Maybe we listen to a worship song on the way to work. It's like, okay. But here's what I know. None of the most important relationships in our lives can thrive in that kind of scenario. In other words, you can't have a rich relationship with your spouse if you just give them the leftovers. You've got to prioritize it, right? You can't have a relationship with your kids if you just, maybe I'll get to you. A decision to remain and stay close to Jesus means prioritizing time to show up, to hear from him through his word, and to talk to him throughout the week, not just in the margins, if you happen to have any time left in the day. And some of you here are like, okay, I wouldn't even know where to start with that though. What would I do? If you need a roadmap for staying connected to the vine, to showing up and going, man, Jesus, I want to hear from you. I want your words to saturate. I want to stay connected in the vine. Here's what it can look like. You get a Bible, and then you just do 3 things. Here's a roadmap. Choose a time, choose a place, have a plan. Choose a time, choose a place, have a plan. Choose a time. I think doing the same time, it doesn't matter what time, but I think there's something about habits that's good to go, okay, this time of the day. Some of you, it's right before bed. Some of you, it's when first thing when you wake up. Mine's when I wake up. I've got energy when I wake up, and I just want to start my day pointing my thoughts and my heart in a divine direction. That's why I do it in the morning. It doesn't matter. You can do it over your lunch break. It doesn't matter, but you just choose the same time. Choose a time. Choose a time. Choose a place. See, I think choosing a place is important because places get associated with habits, don't they? In fact, have you ever moved homes before? You ever lived in a home for a long time and then you moved? And in your previous home, when you walked into the bathroom, the light switch was on the right, but in your new home, it's on the left. But for the first year that you live in your new home, every time you do this, right? Why? Because places bring with it habits, and it begins to rewire our thinking. I think there's something powerful about choosing the same place to show up. Go, Jesus, I'm gonna show up here for a few minutes. I just wanna hear from you. For Jenny, that's on the deck. Every morning I walk out, she's out on the deck. For me, I got a chair in my office. It might be, it might be a place at your work. It might be a place out in your yard. I don't know, but just choose a place that you go, this is the place I'm gonna show up. I just wanna hear from you, Jesus. I wanna talk to you. I want your word to saturate because I wanna stay close. I wanna stay connected to the vine. And then have a plan. Have a plan. This one's so important. In other words, go into it knowing what you're gonna read or knowing what you're gonna do, because I think sometimes if you go in and just like, okay, I'll just eeny, meeny, miny, mo, open the Bible, it's like, it doesn't have context, it doesn't have flow. In other words, saying, hey, I'm gonna read through the Psalms. I'm gonna read one Psalm a day. I'm gonna read through the Gospel of John. That's the book that we've been kind of working through over the course of this series where Jesus makes these I am statements. I don't know, just have a plan. And if you don't know where to start with a plan, one of the best decisions that you will make today for some of you is gonna be to go to our website, go to our app, and jump on one of the Bible reading plans that we've created. We've created a ton of them to make it easy for you. 5-day reading plans, 10-day reading plans, 15-day, all sorts of selections. You wanna hear something really cool? This is awesome. I just found this out this week. We've now had over 300,000 people complete our Bible reading plans here at LCBC just this year. And now, in total, over the last few years, we've had over 1.2 million people complete our Bible reading plans through this church. You can clap. I think that's amazing. And I'll tell you why some of you, why it gets me excited. Here's why it gets me excited. It's because this is where we start remaining. We set aside time. We say, Jesus, I want to show up. I don't want you to get the margins. I want to show up throughout the week. I just want to hear from you. I want to talk to you. Because I'm in a season right now that I need to be connected. I want to bear fruit. Listen, guys, the most worthy goal that you can run after in life, the most worthy goal you can have in this life is not to live a good life. That's not the most worthy goal. The most worthy goal that you can give your life to is to stay close to Jesus, to remain in Christ. Because if you do that, you will live a good life. The goal isn't the fruit. The goal is to stay connected to the vine. You'll produce fruit. I've told some of you before, my life changed when I was 20 years old. I mean, it changed. I was in a season of life then where I knew all about Jesus, but I did not know Jesus. And you know there's a difference between those two things, right? I knew all about Jesus, I just didn't know him. I wasn't attached to the vine at all. In fact, I'd been running from Jesus, building my life completely around me, lying to everyone I knew. That's not a joke. My whole life was a lie. Using people. And I've told you before, man, if you knew me then, you'd cancel me today. That's why I'm so grateful God never does. But then, when I was 20, man, the grace of God just grabbed hold of my heart in a way that changed me. I fell into the mercy of Jesus, and I made a decision to follow him and trust him with my life. And I'm telling you that because, man, those early days, fruit. Those early days, fruit. I mean, I felt connected. I felt like, oh, I am a branch. Jesus, you are the vine. I am in, and I am just more joy right now, more peace right now. I was experiencing it. That first year of following Jesus, it was just so much fruit. And you know, I would take times, talking about prioritizing time to show up. I would take, a lot of my evenings were spent taking a quick walk, just talking to Jesus. And I would read some of the Bible, and I would just reflect on Jesus and his words and his promises to me. And I would walk this little trail, the same trail every single night, again and again and again. And I would just talk out loud like I got my friend with me. And I was so connected. But then a few months went by, and then a few years went by, and I reached a point now in my life, I was actually in ministry. I was serving here at LCBC, probably about 10 years in. And one Saturday evening, my eyes were open to the condition that my soul had fallen into. I was driving here to LCBC to speak one weekend, and about 1.5 miles from where I'm standing here right now, about 1.5 miles from here, when I saw the church building on that Saturday afternoon, I just broke down. I started weeping in my car. And I said out loud, I've got nothing to give. I got nothing to give. Dry, empty, brittle. And you may not have been able to tell because I still had some leaves showing, but if you were to look up underneath that, man, the fruit, it was dying. And that weekend was a wake-up call to me. And I started taking inventory on my life, and I was struck by something. I was doing a lot of activity then. I was getting things done. But somewhere along the way, I stopped taking walks with Jesus. I just stopped walking with him. I stopped remaining. I stopped drawing close. I had squeezed time to connect with God and hear from God to the margins instead of prioritizing it. And I just decided, and the goal that I was going to run after with my life was not to live a good life. The goal I wanted to run after is to remain, to stay close to you, Jesus, to start taking walks again. And I chose a time to show up, to hear from Jesus through his word. I chose a place that I'd show up throughout the week, and I had a plan. And over time, I started to fill back up. It didn't happen overnight, I promise you that. Fruit takes time. But slowly, the gardener was bringing my heart back to life. And perhaps you're here today and you get that. You get it. Because you feel like this branch. You feel a bit dry today. You feel a little bit empty. You feel like the life has gone out. And it's not like life has been hard for some of you, it's just stagnant. And your Savior is standing before you today saying, I made you to bear fruit, to grow more into who I made you to be. So attach yourself to me and let's get this adventure going again. And then I realized that some of you are here and the weather has been real rough lately. It's felt like a pruning season. It's felt like things have been cut away and you felt the stress of life. And I just want you to hear the voice of your Savior today saying, I've never left you. I've never left you. I've never left you. Stay close. Don't walk away. I know it hurts, but everything I do can bring fruit. Guys, he wants you. He wants you. He wants your heart. He wants you to thrive. He wants you to bear fruit. He wants to do something in your life so much greater than anything you can ever imagine, and he's asking you to stay close, to show up, to meet with him, to learn from him, to follow him and trust him, even when it feels like pruning, even when it feels slow. Let the gardener do his work. Heavenly Father, thank you that your heart is always for us. You are the good gardener. Even when it feels like pruning, even when it feels like seasons of drought, you have not left us. And Jesus, I would have to imagine there's some of us here today who've just gone through the motions. We've fallen into a life, don't even really know how it happened, but we've fallen into a life where everything's just a bit stale. We're just a little bit dry. We're just a little bit empty. And if we were being honest, we're just disconnected from you. Bring us back, Jesus. Bring us back. We're going to show up. We're going to choose a place. We're going to choose a time and place and a plan, and we just need to hear from you. We want you to fill us back up, Jesus. Some of us are here, and it's a painful season. Jesus, would you remind us you are still with us? You've never left our side. That you can produce something in us if we'll let you. Let the gardener do his work. So we're going to trust you with that, Jesus. And it's in your name we pray.